Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Chris Evans. This is my first year on the Battalion team. I'm pretty new to Battalion team and Prodigy as a whole. I saw the post. I thought it looked like a fun thing, so kind of gonna go over my bag real quick. It's still a work in progress, but it's pretty much set for most of my tournaments. We'll start with the putters. For my putters, I use P model US's and just the normal base plastic. Really love these things. They're just really flat. They have a really straight flight, not too much fade. They don't get too much turn in them, and they're just kind of shallow. I like how shallow they are. It's really good for kind of like getting a pop out of it. I keep the same stamps. Keep it simple when I'm picking them both up. I like to put with both putters in my hand. So I have another base model, P model US. This is my kind of straight approach disc. If I don't have like a hyzer or a forehand hyzer line, I'll usually stand still this between like 150 to 180. I love these. They're pretty torque resistant for being a P model US. They don't really turn too terribly much. They don't have a hard fade. They just stay straight. I can throw them pretty hard, and they're not going to turn over as long as there's not a crazy headwind. My backhand approach disc, for the most part, I have a PX3. Just picked this up recently, so I'm still kind of learning it, but it's pretty stable. Has a pretty consistent left finish. Like I said, I'll drive with this one a little bit, but not too terribly much. It's also normally like a standstill backhand hyzer release for me. Then I've got two A2s. I've got 1 and 300 soft. This is my, I say for the most part, if I'm dealing with lots of OB, this is my main approach disc. Still got enough stability, even being the 300 plastic, that's fairly beat to have that consistent finish. But it grabs grass, it doesn't skip so much. So if there's a lot of OB around baskets, or if I really just don't want a lot of movement, that's what I'm throwing. And then outside of that, if I'm driving on a shorter hole, I'll probably use the 400 A2. Super beefy, doesn't care about angle, doesn't care about wind. If I put it on, crazy Annie, it's gonna come back and finish to the right on a forehand. I don't throw these too much as backhand, but even then they don't turn too much. So really love these for approaches. Then of course the new one, everyone's got to have a distortion in the bag. I'm really starting to love these things for my forehand approaches. They're kind of taking the A2 spot. It really pushes straighter a little bit. It's a little glidier. It doesn't quite dump as hard. So I can really get a more straight to fade finish out of this. And I will backhand this as well. It's really comfortable in the hand. I think more comfortable for backhand than the A2s are, so I'm absolutely loving this. I'm definitely going to get more. Hopefully, these get made in like some of the soft plastics, and it'll probably bump the A2 out of my bag entirely. But until then, I'll hold on to them. That's it for all my approaches and putters. We'll move on to mids. I don't have a lot. I'm not a super mid-range heavy guy. We'll start with the M4 400G. Just your average straight mid-range. Might have a little bit of turn. It doesn't dump out too hard at the end. Just good for straight shots. Like I said, I'm not much of a mid-range person. I'll either throw a fairway or one of my approach discs. But when I do, I know that the M4 is going to be just that staple of a mid-range disc that everyone needs. Coming up from that, I've got the M2. This is probably one I go to more than the M4, just because the M4 have a tendency to turn over on me at some point because I'm not quite used to throwing the mids too much. But the M2 just comes out flat, it stays straight, it can take a headwind, and then dumps off to the left like it should. So loving this one so far, and I'll throw my mids usually up to like 300 max. And then probably I'd say like 250 to 3, I'll throw my mids. Anything below that, I'm going to throw one of the approaches. But loving the M2 so far. I've got the Battalion stamped MX3. This one is actually fairly flippy. It doesn't like turn over crazy, but thrown flat, it'll just kind of glide to the right and it'll just hold a semi-flat anhyzer push. Doesn't have a ton of fade. I love the MX3 though. They fly like almost like a putter. They go slow, they glide, and they just set down and float. So that's kind of my understable mid at the moment. And then I'm working this one into the bag. This is a new misprint 750 MX3. This one is very stable. It still has that glidiness to it, and even when its stability, it kind of glides left more than it just dumps. but it's definitely more the one I trust in a headwind and in a shot I don't want going right. That's it for the mids. Like I said, I don't throw too many of them, so we'll move on to the F series. F5, you know, just obviously the hyzer flip to turn shot, or just a turn that you know never is going to come out. Maybe a tailwind approach or something like that. But anytime I need something super flippy, this is more likely what I'm going to throw. More so than that, I'll throw the F3 because it's a little less flippy. It'll still get that turnover line, but instead of landing on an edge, it'll kind of pan out and land flat. So I love that for this. Great hyzer flip, great woods disc, minus the fact that it's green, but you know, is what it is. Probably my most thrown fairway at the moment is this 400G F2. It's a lighter weight. It's only like 167, but without a headwind, throwing it goes flat. Get a little bit of turn in it, and it'll just hold that, and it'll come back at the end. So this is on tight lines. This is almost always what I'm throwing. Or if I have to throw something high that I want to push left instead of just dumping left, I'll throw this. Get a little bit of flip up if I throw it nose up, and then it'll dump back left, so it'll kind of glide instead of just dump. And then of course, 400G F1. I feel like every stage of discs, you need a disc that's just going to go dead straight and then end left. No matter what's in front of it, no matter what you do to it, it's going to go straight, it's going to end left, and that is the F1 in this category. Moving on next, we'll go through all of kind of the fairway to hybrid area. We'll start out with the Battalion team stamped H5. It's marked as an H2. But this is up there with the flippiest thing that I've ever thrown. It doesn't matter. I could release it on a pretty much grenade angle, and it will flip all the way over. So this is my roller disc. I don't throw too many rollers, but this is almost like my get out of jail free card. You know, if I can't throw very hard and I need something to get some turn, this is more likely what I'll throw. Going on from that, I have the F model OS. I got in the Duraflex plastic. I don't know if the other plastics are any different, but this is way too flippy to be calling an OS to me. I throw it flat and it just holds right until maybe the very end. It'll kind of glide to the bottom, but it's definitely flippy. I don't throw this too much on forehand because of how flippy it is, but it's a good kind of straight disc, kind of like what I'd use that F2 for, just a little faster. Moving up from that, I have the FX3. Absolutely love this thing. It's kind of like a super beat F2, you know, is what I could compare it to. I didn't really have a forehand hyzer flip game until this disc. It's got enough torque resistance that it won't just flip over, but it flips up, it flies, and then it finishes. So love it for that. I'd love it for little like tiny hyzer flips or something that'll turn and then dump at the end, backhand. Absolutely loving this disc. The more I work with it, the better it gets. So probably going to pick up some more of these. Then, of course, the FX2. Like I said, one of those staples. You got to have something stable in there, mainly forehand. For forehand drives that are probably 300, maybe 350 or less, I'll throw this. Love it. It feels good in the hand. It flies great. It's got a consistent finish. It's one of those, you know, I can throw on a flex, I can throw it flat, I can throw skip shots with it. It's kind of like a utility all-around disc. This is probably one of my most thrown discs, so love that. Going on from that into kind of the hybrids, I've got an H3 in the Spectrum 500 plastic. That's actually pretty flippy. It's one of those, if I were to throw it flat, it'll turn. I'm starting to realize I do have quite a bit of flippy stuff in my bag, but that's because I don't really manipulate disc angles. I kind of throw flat and let the disc do what it's supposed to do. So definitely a useful slot. Very glidey too. This probably reaches up there with a lot of my drivers sometimes. It's a great disc to have. Going on from that, I've got the H3 V2 in 400 plastic. Very different from the last one. This one is just straight, consistent finish to the left. Doesn't move right, doesn't dump on hyzer immediately. It's gonna this one will hit right around like the 350 mark, and then it'll dump pretty much every time. I call it my 7-iron of disc golf, because I know where it's gonna go and I know exactly at that distance it's gonna dump out. So it's super useful to have. Absolutely loving this. It kind of replaced like the Onyx or Thunderbird category in my bag, and I absolutely am having a blast throwing that. So from there, move on to the drivers. We'll start with my D4. Kind of just put this back in the bag. It's super pop top. It's a 400 plastic. Kind of beat in. The dome makes it not like the crazy understable that's gonna roll. This one I'll usually throw on big turnovers. I'll throw it high and let it just hold the pan the whole way, and then it'll land flat. Still kind of working it in there. Bomber for tailwinds, anything like that. Still working on whether or not it'll roll for me. I'm not very good at rollers, but so D4. Little step up from that, I've got a 400G D2 I picked up from a tournament up in northern New York. Really good flying disc. It flies like what I expected D2s to fly like. Kind of has that flip and just holds that like a distance disc would, and then comes out a little bit at the end. Not a headwind or anything like that, but tailwind definitely what I'm throwing in. Or if I have an open field with no OB, this will be the distance disc I throw. My main disc, this is my workhorse, is I have this 400 plastic beat-in D1. I can't remember where I got it from, if I picked it up from like a used bin or someone sold it to me online, but this is my go-to disc for drives. It's pretty beat-in. It's got a good turn. Comes back a little bit at the end. It's my, like I said, my number one disc. If there's a longer than probably 370 or 360, this is what I'm pulling out. And most of my drivers, I'll pull out to go 360 to 420 at max. I can't get too much further than that at the moment. Next up from that, I have a D1 Max. Out of the box, these are a little flippier, or I'd say quite a bit flippier than D1s. They'll come out with a very small amount of turn, and then they'll hold straight, and then they'll have, I wouldn't say a hard finish, but a consistent finish. So when it's a slight headwind, I'll throw this over that other D1. Step up from that one is this D2 and 400 plastic. My first run I bought of D2s were very stable. They were, there was no flip to them. There wasn't too much glide. I threw them out of my hand flat, and they're immediately on this angle. This one is kind of beat itself in. Hoping it gets beat into about where that other one I have is, but right now it's kind of my headwind distance disc. So that's where that one's at. From most of my headwind shots, this is what I'm using right now. I've got the Cannonbird D1. It's that same disc category I'm telling you about. It just goes dead straight and then finishes off to the left. So absolutely loving this. It feels great in the hand. It's great for forehands. It's great for backhands. Loving the D1s. Step up from that, I have this Spectrum D2 Pro. This thing's never going to flip. It doesn't really care about wind. Mostly only throw this forehand. It's super flat, and it feels really good to forehand this. So that's usually what I use that for if I don't use the D1. If I want something a little shorter, that's what I'll throw. And last, this is kind of a utility disc. I have the D2 Pro Prototype and the Spectrum 500 plastic. These things are board flat. This is by far the most overstable thing I've thrown next to a tilt. Super overstable. I throw it on an angle like this, and within 50 feet, it's flat, working out into highs already. This is something I'm throwing is like, if I don't like throwing grenades, so if I need something to do what a grenade's gonna do, I'll throw this on a hyzer, I'll throw it flat above trees, and it'll come down on a spike and it's not going anywhere. Or if I need a massive skip, this is what I'm throwing. So that is pretty much all my bag. Like I said, it's a work in progress. Things are going in and out. I'm trying new mids, trying new fairways. So as it changes, maybe I'll make more videos and update it. But at the moment, this is what I got, and I'm loving it. The Prodigy plastic is, like I said, I'm pretty new to it, but I'm loving it. It's really got really good feeling to it. So super stoked for the rest of the tournament season, and I hope you guys, are out there doing great.